Welcome everybody to Lecture 3, where the title is Then and Now. In week 3, now that you've had a couple of weeks of using English, we want you to continue that and use English as much as possible in your daily life. Start trying to think in English, start trying to watch movies in English, start trying to read the internet in English. Try and do as much as you can so that you can continue to build on the good work that you've done so far. Secondly, the idea of noticing the phrases in English. So in this course you would have seen there's a lot of times we say this is because when we're giving a reason, and the first main benefit is, so when we're talking about some of the advantages, we're able to use these set phrases again and again. So it's important that you start using these phrases when you're speaking and when you're talking with other classmates and thinking in academic English. Another thing to think about this week is the use of the past and present tenses. Because the title is Then and Now, then gives a feeling that it's the past and now is the present. So that's why we're going to be talking a lot about past and present tenses this week. In the listening, it's important to practice academic listening with websites such as TED.com. And I've got a little picture of TED.com up here. And the idea of TED is that there's a lot of great talks, a lot of quite academic talks where they talk about serious topics, and it allows you to hear the information, to see the speaker in a range of different accents from different countries around the world. And there's also subtitles as well that you can use, so you can read as you listen. Also, as part of this course, it's important to watch the vocabulary videos, and these will further help with listening. And when you watch the vocabulary videos, that gives you a nice little easy introduction into the week's content. So, for example, this week one of the pieces of vocabulary is modern, and I want you to notice that the stress is on the first syllable. So we say modern, modern, and so I've underlined the stress here. It's an adjective, and the meaning is current and up to date. And the example sentence, I prefer modern movies compared to old movies. So now I've underlined the word modern and old because that's where the stress is. That's the most important part of the information in this sentence. It's comparing the modern and the old, so we need to make sure that people can clearly hear what the comparisons are, and that's why we stress those words, modern, old. So when you're listening to the vocabulary videos, you can actually mark the stress. Listen to the speaker and mark the stress, and that's quite a good activity to do. Let's turn now to the 4 pictures, and question 1, what do you see in the 4 pictures? In picture A, I can see a telephone that used to be used in the 20th century, probably in the early 20th century, could be 80 years ago, and it's a black telephone. It's a telephone where you need to spin the numbers around, let them go and spin them, and you have to dial each number separately. It's a telephone which might not have any other features. It's just a simple telephone, and it sits in one place in the house. Picture B shows how people used to communicate. People used to write letters. They wrote letters to their friends, they wrote letters to their family, they wrote letters to organizations and companies. This was the way that people communicated a long time ago, and it was before the electronic age, before the digital age. And we can see in this picture there is a man and he's writing a letter, and there's a pair of glasses in the foreground as well. Picture C shows a plane. However, this plane is quite an old plane. This plane is probably about 50 or 60 years old. It has a twin propeller at the front. People flew on these planes in the 20th century. It's standing at an airport and it's ready to fly. In picture D, we can see a man and he's sitting on a train. It looks like quite a new train. However, the man is reading the newspaper. People read the newspaper a lot again in the 20th century. People still read the newspaper now, of course. However, a lot of information now is on the internet, whereas then people used to get most of their information from a source such as a newspaper. The man looks quite comfortable. He's sitting in a little cabin. He's sitting close to the window as well, and he's probably enjoying himself. Question 2. Can you remember some old technology that is not used these days? I can remember cassette tapes. Cassette tapes were used for music. People played cassette tapes to listen to different bands or different singers, and they had to turn them over after the first side and listen to the second side. The problem with cassette tapes was often that they would break. They were quite fragile, means they weren't very strong, and they could break quite easily. So that's a form of old technology. There are many other forms of old technology that are not used these days. Some of the earliest computers, they had storage devices where you could store information, and they were disks, which we don't use these days. Now a lot of the information is used with USB or HDMI or other devices. However, in the 20 years ago, 30 years ago, disks were the way that people stored information. Question 3. What can you clearly remember from when you were a child? When I was a child, I remember going fishing with my father. We went fishing every month. We went fishing down to the water, down to the ocean often, and we caught a lot of fish. The reason we caught a lot of fish is because there were probably more fish 30 years ago than there were these days. These days it seems that a lot of people have overfished and there's not so many resources left. So I remember going down there when I was a child. We would fish, we would spend a lot of time. It was a happy time. It was nice to be there with my father at the beach, and so this is some of my earliest memories. Let's now turn to reading for this week, and something to notice about the reading is that you'll see that there is a past tense being used, particularly the past simple tense, and the past simple tense is used when we have completed actions. These are actions which are finished. So in the first paragraph about electricity, the electric light bulb was first invented in 1879 by Thomas Edison. So was invented. There we have a completed past, a past simple. Although many scientists work on electricity for many years before this, Edison was the first man to make the light bulb long-lasting and reliable. So again, he was the first man. We're using the past simple because we're talking about the 1800s, 1879. In the second example, we have cars. The invention of cars gave people freedom they never had before. For the first time, cars allowed people to travel long distances in a short amount of time. Again, we've got those verbs, gave and allowed, both using the past simple. There's other verbs as well in the past simple, meant, invented, and became. So you'll often see that when there's a past event, it'll have the past simple like that. Let's turn now to the listening for this week, and this listening from early memories to recent memories. And we look at this little section of the text. I remember the house I lived in when I was about 3 years old. In particular, I remember the room where I used to play seemed so big. I also remember trying to climb a tree in front of our house. I think I fell off. You can probably notice that there is the use of the past tense all through there because the person is telling a story about their past. So I lived, was about 3 years old, where I used to play. I also remember trying to climb a tree. I think I fell off. Fell is the past tense there. Question. David remembers trying to. Now, in this activity, there are 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3, when he was 3 years old. So you need to try and find 3 words that fit into that gap. David remembers. Now, the person who's telling the story is David. So David is I. Remembers trying to. So when I see the question, I can see this word remember. I can see the word remember in the question, and I can hear it when I'm listening. So we know that the answer must be around here, or we assume the answer is around here. David remembers trying to, there we go, climb a tree. So the answer should be climb a tree. The spelling of climb is a little bit tricky. It has a silent B at the end. We can't hear the B. The word is climb, but the spelling is C-L-I-M-B. Now, if you're going to do an IELTS test, you need to have very accurate spelling. So it's really important to work on your spelling to try and improve it at this stage. In the speaking section for this week, we need to use the past simple when we're giving our responses. We've got a lot of questions here about childhood, your earliest memories, where did you live when you were 8 years old, when was the first time you used a computer. So you need to try and use the past simple in all of these, because all of these are completed events. Even some of the events last weekend or last night or this morning, it's still a completed event. So you would use past simple throughout your answers here. For the writing, again, we're looking at a question where we have to analyze, brainstorm, and choose our best ideas. In this example, we have the way people communicate these days is different from the way it was 50 years ago. In your opinion, what are the main differences in the way people communicate? Do you think these changes have benefited the way we live? In your opinion, what are the main differences in the way people communicate? Do you think these changes have benefited? We know when we analyze that these are the two important words. What are the differences and how they benefited? So now we have a quick look when we do our brainstorm in section B, our brainstorm. The differences: 50 years ago they wrote letters, now they write emails. 50 years ago they spoke face to face, now speak via the internet. 50 years ago spoke on home phone, now speak via mobile phone. So we can put these into our paragraph, into our first body paragraph. And then we can think about the second half of the essay. Do you think these changes have benefited the way we live? So we have the benefits: faster communication, saves time to meet other people, and communicate from anywhere. So we've got a really nice, easy to understand essay here. We've talked about the differences very clearly, and now we've moved straight into the benefits. And then we essay structure as follows. This is where we choose our ideas. Our introduction, we have our normal structure. In body paragraph 1, we talk about the differences. Body paragraph 2, the benefits. And then the conclusion, once again, we have our benefits, and then we will have a little future statement. In the future, I believe the way people communicate will continue to change as new technology evolves.